Welcome to Shadow of Truth, and today is Thursday, January the 12th, 2017, and your hosts are Dave Kranzler from InvestmentResearchDynamics.com and Rory Hall from thedailycoin.org. How's it going today, Dave?
Yeah, not too bad. A little bit older than the last time we chatted, but probably not any wiser.
That's exactly how I feel. And fighting a cold and all this other stuff, but let's talk about some gold and talk about India and China and what's going on with gold.
That sounds great. I'll always talk about gold anytime you want.
Well, let's hit it. I would agree wholeheartedly. I think that would be a fine use of some hemp rope. String Mr. Soros from the nearest tree. Lamppost will work just fine as well.
Do it in the old traditional way from a giant oak tree somewhere in the middle of Georgia.
That'd be good.
Yeah.
That'd be close to home. Make travel easy.
I'd pay to see that.
Yeah, just think if it was on pay-per-view. $49.99. One night only.
Damn. We can make money.
Oh, you make a lot of money.
Well, what do you want to rap about here?
Well, gold and silver always have my interest, and since they've both been on the rise the past few days, I wanted to see if you had heard anything from Mr. Brimlow that may be of interest as far as what's going on in India in particular with their gold, because I mean, as you know, I've been pretty sick the past week, and I haven't been able to dig into stuff. And if I remember correctly, it seems like there was some noise made about India banning gold from the citizens or trying to take their gold away from them or something just recently. I mean, like I said, between being on vacation, being out for the holidays, and coming back and being sick, everything's kind of cloudy right now. Am I right in that? I mean, is there something that's been said recently about Modi attacking gold in India?
On Tuesday night, the ex-duty premium there was $6 in the morning and $7.50 in the afternoon. And this is usually what happens in India is when gold gets hit and it gets taken down by the manipulators, the premiums go up and the demand soars. And then, it only takes like a $20 or $30 bounce to cool off demand. But this was yesterday with gold at 1187, and so it's run up. Actually, gold ticked below 1150, I think, at one point before it bottomed. And so the fact that you're still seeing ex-duty import premiums this high after a move like that, a quick move, because what happens is India, like, if you get a quick move up in the market like we just had, India will cool off for a few days until they get used to paying a higher price.
Right.
They always want it. It's just a question of price, and then it's just a question of them getting used to the price.
Right.
So, with the premiums that's high enough for legal kilobar imports. The Doré bars, the duty advantage was almost $15. So there were a ton of Doré bars going into India. And this is actually with the week, the rupee was down yesterday. So I haven't seen his update for what happened for us last night, for them Thursday, today. Okay. But I would assume it maybe cooled down a little bit because gold was even higher again. So
yeah, it's sitting at 12, just a tick over 1,200 right now.
Yeah, and that's usually at a round number. When it moves up to a round number, they cool off for a few days and then they start buying again. So it looks like, and I'm guessing, and my good friend Jesse at Jesse's Cafe Americain wrote a great piece a couple nights ago about what happened in India with Modi, and he usually doesn't speculate on conspiracy theories. The conspiracy theory being that the U.S. had a heavy influence in what Modi did to eliminate those cash bills as a means to slow down the gold flow into India. And so if Jesse is willing to come out and say, write about that as a possibility, it's probably a very, very strong possibility that that particular conspiracy theory is a conspiracy truth. And as soon as I saw that, when it first hit the tape originally, I was like, oh, that has the U.S. footprints all over it. And then I did a little bit of research, and I found out that the guy who used to be the head of the Royal Bank of India, the India Central Bank, is now a vice chairman at the BIS. So you follow the footsteps in the snow, and you can see where it leads. So I think it's a situation that's going to backfire. I think all of the policies or all the programs they've tried to implement over there to get people to switch from physical gold to paper gold, etc., they've all failed, and it looks like this initiative is failing also. And on the flip side, and I don't know if this was just a rumor to pacify the masses or not, but there's been a rumor that India was going to cut the import duty on gold from 10% to 6%. Now, to me, that doesn't make sense in light of what Modi just tried to do. But who knows? I mean, we don't really know what the real situation is on the ground over there, and there could have been a serious, groundswell of protesting and backlash against the government by the masses of it. I don't know. I have no idea. So that might have been floated out there to pacify them. I think we'll find out on February 1st if that import duty cut actually happens. That rumor's circulated before. It was circulating when Modi got elected, and it never happened. So I'm not speculating either way on that. I would probably err to the side of it's not going to happen. But again, based on the data we're getting out of India, I don't think it's going to matter. In terms of what's going on in Shanghai, the premiums over there have cooled off, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything in terms of the demand per se. They could have come down just because of the volatility in the yuan versus the dollar recently. I know that Tuesday night, well, for us Tuesday night, for them Wednesday, the delivery volume into the Shanghai Gold Exchange was 60 tons, which is a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah, and admittedly for the first week after the new year, the delivery volume slowed down quite a bit, but it always does, or it usually does. So I think what's going on, and I think a lot of what we were seeing, especially during the Trump rally period of this country, was in this onslaught of fake news. Part of the fake news component was the reporting on what's going on in the physical bullion markets in India and China. And I think we were getting a lot of misinformation and disinformation. And I think it's all designed to discourage the West, and especially people in the U.S., from actually buying precious metals. I mean, we saw that WikiLeaks, you saw that WikiLeaks of that cable that was sent between England and the U.S. in 1974, right?
Right.
Yeah, so it says specifically in there, they rolled out the paper market in order to create a flood of paper gold supply to suppress the price and discourage physical demand in this country.
That's
so we
the
know
whole
that's
idea.
That's ingrained in the agenda of the U.S. government,
Of the and which is handled by the COMEX and LBMA.
right?
So
a lot of this stuff that hats off to GATA, man, because they've spent a lot of money trying to establish this point in the court of law. What their premise all along was correct, and all this stuff that the gold investing community has been accused of in terms of conspiracy theories, they're conspiracy truths.
they're facts.
Yes.
Before we get too far away I want to Jayant Bandahari. I believe that he was with Goldman Sachs in India, left them, and he's now been writing a lot about what's happening in India, and he's been doing the series that Acting Man has been publishing for several weeks. The last one that he published was on January the 1st. And in a recent interview after that, like in the last week or so, he was saying that this whole scheme, this latest scheme of the taking the 500 and 1,000 rupee banknotes away is not going to work, and to push everybody into electronic cash or electronic currency, I should say. And the reason that it's not going to work is because India is a population of 1.3 billion people, while only 0.3 billion of those people have access to the internet, leaving a full 1 billion of them with no way of accessing their accounts except to go to a bank. And they're not going to, he was saying that they're not going to do that because they're rural. It's a rural farming country. And unlike the United States, where you drive for 10 miles and all of a sudden you've got a city, from the picture that he painted, it's not like that. You could drive for 50 miles and not see anything except cows and farmland. So this whole scheme to steal everybody's wealth has about run its course, except for the fact of the chaos that they're left with, because now they have no cash, and you have all these farmers that have no way of getting of being able to go to market with anything. They have nothing because all of their cash is now worthless, and they haven't been able to replace it. And I suspect that all of the cash that they did have bought physical gold. And I wanted to ask you, Dave, those premiums that we were seeing for a couple of weeks that I was reporting about quite a bit on the Shanghai Gold Exchange, and the difference between the backwardation premium, whatever you want to call it, in the Shanghai Gold Exchange physicals futures market versus the COMEX LBMA digital market, they got up pretty high. They've cooled off. They're down in the mid-teens right now, but they got up into the 30s, $40, $50 an ounce. Do you think that was or it seems like that was a function of the Indians coming to market with their 500 and 1,000 rupee banknotes and buying up as much physical gold as they could, because now it's all washed out, and here we are back down in the mid-teens. I mean, is that viable? Because there was that huge spike up.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying that it was all of a sudden their supply had to be redirected to India, and it caused the premiums to go up in China.
Right.
Again, I mean, I hadn't thought about it that way, but that's definitely a distinct possibility. I wouldn't rule it out. I don't think there's any way to prove it, unfortunately, but it would make sense in the context of the fake news reports that were coming out that said that the fake news was explaining the high premiums there as a function of import restrictions that were put into place in China. And that to me, I was like, I mean, my head almost spun around like in The Exorcist. I was like, what? You think China's going to put import restrictions on gold coming into the country? You got to be on drugs. They're trying to buy every frickin' sliver of gold they can find.
And they don't care if it's still in the ground. They'll buy the mine. They're fine with that.
Right, exactly. So if it was the case, if that was a factor in terms of the West having to all of a sudden, reroute gold and headed for China and send it to India because of that a surge in demand from what happened, which that actually makes a lot of sense in terms of if you study the economic behavior of human behavior, the economics of human behavior, when you get a situation like that, there's going to be it's sort of the vision of people lining up at the bank in the late 70s to stand in line to get gold,
Right.
that type of thing. So there could have been a huge rush, and the banks had to divert some of the flow into China back to India to feed the ducks, so to speak.
Well, I mean, because if you think about it, I mean, and you and I discussed this when it was, a few weeks ago, as far as reporting on that premium continually going up. It started out in the teens, and then it got into the 20s and the 30s, and then it jumped. Like I said, I think it got almost to $60 an ounce on gold, and it was well north of 10% on silver. I mean, the backwardation premium on the Shanghai Gold Exchange, the futures market for silver, that divergence it got out of control as well for silver. And all of that was going on as as this whole thing was on fire. I mean, that whole thing was lit up at that point as far as what's going on in India. And that was the only thing that I could think of. And it's like, I looked at it this morning, and it was like at $12 or something an ounce on gold, and it's like, well, that's funny. It's about $13.50 right now, according to didthesystemcollapse.com. And it's at $13.78 is the divergence right now as we're speaking, and that's a huge difference from mid 30s to 13.
Well, yeah, and I knew that the premiums weren't going to last up that high forever anyway. So, I'm surprised they actually got that high, and I think it's an indication of the function of the size of demand over there. So, and I think the demand is probably increasing. I did see a report that the withdrawals from the Shanghai Gold Exchange were lower in 2016 than they were in 2015, and whether or not that's actually true in reality, who knows? I mean, and to some degree, I think the Chinese government does the same thing the U.S. government does. They put out for the public to consume what they want the public to consume, not necessarily the truth.
I would agree with that.
So, I just had one more thing I wanted to point out about in terms of what's going on in gold.
Okay.
And if you're good with that, and we can wrap this up.
Okay.
Phoenix Capital put out a piece yesterday, and I find their stuff to be kind of a little bit milquetoast and lacking depth, but they had a great chart yesterday, and it showed there was a crossover in the weekly between the 50-week moving average for gold crossed up and over the 200-week moving average. And they said the only other time this happened in the last 16 years was in 2002. Remember that's
Okay.
And this is on the continuous contract, which they use a stock charts chart, which is the continuous continuous contract end of day price on the COMEX, and that's typically what traders use to analyze technicals, as opposed to the front month contract. And I wasn't aware of this, but the only other time that's happened when the 50 crossed up and over the 200 was in 2002, and we know what happened to gold after that. And in fact, they are good enough to show a long-term weekly chart of what happened with gold when that event happened. So I think, again, I don't put faith in technical analysis. I use it for short-term trade decisions typically, And again, I don't necessarily put faith in the 5,200-day crossover, but with this thing on a weekly basis, and the last time it happened was in 2002, and I had said, I can't remember if I put it in my mining stock journal 2 issues ago. I said I think there's a distinct possibility that, and this was in late December. I said I think there's a distinct possibility that we're bottoming here on this pullback in gold, and I think the next move higher has the potential to be more powerful than the one we had during 2016. And, again, I wouldn't live and die by that statement. I was just, a hunch that I had. But it certainly, when I see things like this 5,200 week crossover event happen, to me, it just adds a little more fuel to my conviction in terms of where I think the next big move in gold is going to be. I think it's going to be up as opposed to down.
That's true.
I do think it's going higher, and I do think they're starting to lose control of it again.
Yes.
And I think we're seeing that reflected in the incredible volatility we're seeing in the currency markets and the interest rate markets right now.
Well, and gold and silver are both moving higher, which is always an indication that something is very wrong. And even in a manipulated market, it's only manipulated to the downside. I mean, they're not going to manipulate it up unless it benefits them, and them being the banking cabal.
That's right.
It's always manipulated to the downside because that's where they make their profits, and that's how they can tell the public everything's fine. Because that's gold and silver's job, is to say, hey, everything is not fine, everything is busted. And to me, that's what, whenever I see this kind of slow, steady uptick like what we've had the last 2 or 3 days, that tells me that something ugly is going on that may or may not be being reported. And if it is being reported, it's probably being reported inaccurately. So,
Geez, you make 2017 sound so dire. What
well,
happened
everything's
to
kind of
the
falling apart. I
what
mean,
happened to the rainbows, unicorns, and cute kitties report?
that's what we're presenting.
Well, you know what? I guess if you don't want to hear the truth, go to a different YouTube channel.
or or get the latest New York Times.
or, or turn on CNN.
CNN, an even better choice. Oh my goodness. Well, I guess that's as good a place as any to wrap it up there, Dave.
Yeah, that sounds good. I got to go address this cold I've got.
Yeah,
So,
I do as well. So I
all
guess we'll
right.
pick it up
Well,
on Monday and take it from there.
that sounds great. Have a great weekend.
You too, buddy.